Hello, this is Looking Back, Looking Forward. My name is Douglas Arner, and this time I want to talk about what we're seeing in the context of digital financial transformation and financial inclusion around the world. Last time, we talked about the 2025 Findex reports and highlighted how across the world over the past 15 years, we've brought in over 2.5 billion people into the financial system for the first time, most via various forms of digital technology, particularly mobile phones, smartphones, mobile money, and a variety of forms of what we call digital public infrastructure or digital financial infrastructure. Things like digital identity systems, fast payment systems, simplified account opening frameworks, and eKYC systems. And if we look at that sort of success, we highlighted how the Findex highlights that really for much of the world, one set of challenges is around the last mile, the poorest, rural areas, least developed countries, conflict areas. These are the challenges from the standpoint of access. But now we're also thinking about issues around usage and quality. And as one aspect of this, I and my team, my colleagues, Musheer, Ahmed, Monica Jasuja, Kuzi, Charamba, Sangita, Gazi, we had the opportunity to work with our friends at the Alliance for Financial Inclusion, and particularly what is called their South Asia Regional Financial Inclusion Working Group. South Asia brings together a variety of countries around the subcontinent, and in this case, we were looking to see where they are in the context of their efforts to support financial inclusion, and particularly their experiences with digital public infrastructure, digital financial infrastructure, and what we call inclusive digital infrastructure to support financial inclusion and broader objectives of sustainable development. And I think South Asia is a very interesting case study because a number of the countries have pursued very strong strategies of fintech for financial inclusion, often based on various aspects of digital public infrastructure and inclusive digital infrastructure. And so it was very interesting to see across South Asia the progress that had been made. And I think if we look across South Asia, we can say that over the past 15 years, there has been a dramatic transformation in financial inclusion. Numbers of people with financial accounts, mobile wallets, or mobile money accounts. The second question then is from an inclusion standpoint, where are there still areas to go? And I think as we see generally around the world with the 2025 Findex, South Asia still has a number of areas where we're really trying to reach quite substantial numbers of people. And in many cases, these are areas that are, once again, poor, rural, underdeveloped, women and other minorities. And the toughest cases are those areas where there may not be mobile phone penetration. But today, for most of South Asia, the mobile phone and increasingly the smartphone penetration rates are very high, which gives us a very good basis. But then the real question moves from if we have access, or at least we have high potential for access, how do we increase the usage and quality of the financial services available? And I think what we find in this review is that digital public infrastructure, inclusive financial infrastructure projects are not a panacea when it comes from the standpoint of financial inclusion and financial sector development. They provide a very important basis, but we found quite a lot of examples across the countries where while the implementation of the DPI or the IDI frameworks had been quite successful, turning that into use for financial services had often been harder. And in many cases, the challenges come from different operations, different agencies dealing with telecoms or financial services or consumer protection or data protection, and challenges about getting the different organizations to work together to address the common issues to make these infrastructures as effective as possible. And I think our big second level lesson out of this analysis was that many countries which have pursued what we call first generation DPI or inclusive digital infrastructure projects are now moving on to second generation DPI or FinTech for financial inclusion projects. These are often building on those foundations of accounts, ID, and payment systems to then increase usage and quality. And the big areas where we're seeing countries working on second-level strategies are around data. In other words, central to many aspects of development is data, and the frameworks of accounts, payments, and ID is an ideal platform for generation of data. But how do you protect that data? How do you use that data? And this is an increasingly central focus. Second is a real challenge. With digital and financial inclusion has also come new risks and vulnerabilities. In other words, that as billions of people have gotten phones and have gotten access to financial accounts, they have become vulnerable to predators. And in particular, the most vulnerable are the most at risk from the standpoint of the vast increase in digital fraud, digital crime across these new infrastructures. And thus, the second aspect that we're seeing from the standpoint of second generation DPI and IDI strategies is really around dealing with these issues. First, from the standpoint of digital and financial literacy, helping people to understand better themselves, their risks, and how to protect themselves, and to make the most of the financial opportunities available. And second, from the standpoint of trying to build new infrastructures that link communications, data, and law enforcement to better protect people, to better identify problems. And really, our third piece from the standpoint of these second-generation strategies is thinking about how we link these newly included people to traditional financial systems and products, particularly government securities for investment that underpin pension systems as well as insurance. How do we build savings systems that help people build their own resilience to save for future needs, but also provide societal resources to support development? So the takeaway of all of this is tremendous success, but DPI and IDI, not a panacea, and we're seeing increasing efforts, particularly in South Asia, but around the world, to build new second-generation strategies to take advantage of the successes in the first, but also to deal with some of the new risks and problems.